Good morning, Kym.
Good morning.
Welcome to Women Who Make It Happen. We'd like to understand a bit more about your career journey, but I thought it would be good to introduce ourselves. So
Sure.
Let's tell everybody about you.
Tell everybody about me. So I guess my personal journey is, I guess I started out as a youngster completely focusing on being a sports teacher or a musician. So I was never going to go anywhere near the city or financial services or anything like that. So, but clearly that didn't really happen. But I've always been fairly sporty. So I still run. I run every day. I run for a club. Just on my 26th and last marathon. I know. My body is falling apart. So that's the end of that for me. But I do still run, and I enjoy that. Luckily, I live right on the edge of a forest, so I run in the forest most mornings, which is great. And I am still a musician, so I've been semi-pro since I was about 18.
Oh, wow.
And
what do you play?
Yeah, so I play a lot. I play guitar, I play drums, I play sax, keyboards. So yeah,
amazing. That's really good.
Yeah, so I was a session singer back in the 90s, and shows how old I am. And I still do it now. My daughter is in musical theatre, is in performing arts. So we do some recording together. So that's still very much in my life.
Oh, wow,
and it's great that she's kind of carrying that on and living the dream, as it were. So that's brilliant. And I guess my thing at the moment really is we bought a house in Italy, in the south of Italy, in Puglia, and so my husband and I really at that point now in our lives that we kind of trying to wind down a little bit on the corporate world and corporate life and spend a bit more time over there. So when I run, I'm learning Italian. So I have an audio thing, and I'm just and people think I'm completely balmy because I'm running along and I'm spouting Italian.
Excellent.
So that's
a good way to learn.
A good way to learn. So that's kind of my personal side of it. But on the corporate side, so as I say, I wasn't really ever thinking about going into the corporate world at all. I decided that having gone to Loughborough University to pursue the kind of the sports teacher thing, that I didn't actually want to teach kids sport because they didn't really want to do it. No. So my mum had a friend in a branch of NatWest, the local branch, and she sort of said, look, there's a great sports facility at NatWest. Come here. So that's what I did, and so 100 years later, there I still was. So, and it's been a really interesting journey, I think, because if I look back on where I started and the kind of experiences that I've had over the sort of 40 years, literally in the city, which is kind of crazy. And then look at today and how things kind of play out today. It's really good to see actually that things have got so much better for women, for diversity in banking, in financial services, not just banking, but
different worlds now.
Completely different worlds, which is great.
Which is good.
Right? So great to see. But I guess it took some of us old people to sort of help to make some of those changes happen, and I think it's really important that we sustain that.
Yeah.
So I started. I was 16 literally, and started at NatWest locally. And I think the first thing I was ever asked to do was to make the tea and the coffee.
Oh my gosh.
It was you did the tea in the morning and the coffee in the afternoon, and my first kind of I remember sort of thinking I'm already going to be a nuisance because I started the same day as a guy called Lee, and I sort of said, well, why do I need to make the tea and the coffee? Why can't Lee make one of them, right? That's not fair.
Yeah.
And bless him, he kind of said, well, I'm good with that. So we actually did get a rota going. So but it was initially, straight away there was that inference. Well, you're the girl, you're the young girl, so therefore,
great, is it?
Yeah. So that was interesting, and I think what was kind of what was really good about where I started to work in the branch that I started, it was a good mix of people, good mix of ages and experiences and stuff, and they were willing to give me a chance.
Yeah.
And I think that's probably been a theme pretty much all my career is, if you've got people that are willing to give you a chance and you take it,
yes,
then and you make the best of it, then that's, I think, how you can sort of, work through your career and make a success of it. So I was very lucky that, I had some great people there. And, back in the day, branches in banks were a bit like on Dad's Army. I mean, you kind of did everything. Everything happened in a branch, and it was very, very different to today. And so I kind of learned my craft, if you like. I learned everything that happened. So, from being a cashier, which as a female, that's all you were expected to be ever. You were never going to get past being a cashier.
Yeah.
But, they also opened accounts, and they did standing orders, they did foreign transfers, they did, everything. And I loved the kind of branch vibe because I loved that interface with the customers.
Yes,
and,
that must be nice.
Which was really good. And, and it was really a community thing, actually. Branches in banks were quite, sort of part of the community, actually. So I think is why people, really miss them now, actually.
Yeah, it's a shame that it's gone that direction.
Yeah. Although I think it's interesting that they are recognising that, there is still a requirement and people still want that.
Absolutely.
So even where they're closing branches, they're having these kind of hubs where,
yes, that's nice,
where people can still go,
Yeah.
So I think it's important in communities, right? So, but yeah, so I learned, all of those kind of things in branches, and then I was very, very lucky to meet somebody, another woman, who was kind of actually breaking through that kind of classic glass ceiling thing. There were three women then who had either managed to get through it or were on their way through it. And I kind of hooked up with one of those ladies, and she kind of took me under her wing and, sort of really helped me to start thinking that you could do something beyond being a cashier.
Yeah.
Because that was the expectation, So I kind of got out of branch banking when I was about 28. I was a branch manager at that point, which again was kind of unheard of. So again, it was lucky that I'd had the opportunity to do that, and I loved it. I really enjoyed that. And then from there, I kind of went to. In those days, it was called an area office, so it kind of looked after a number of branches in a certain area of London. And I had a training team that would go around to all these branches and train people on all of the kind of things that we used to do in branches. Yeah. You'd train the staff and what have you. And that's really where I think my career started, in the sense of, thinking beyond, you're just going to work in a branch or you're just going to be a cashier. Yeah. There were other things that I kind of hadn't really realised up until that point that were there, or even available to somebody like me. So I worked in the area office, and these three ladies, one of whom actually is one of my daughter's godmothers. So I'm still,
that's nice.
Let's say, Francis. So I'm still in touch, Francis. And it was so important then. I think it's so important now that you take opportunities where they present themselves, and you make sure that you are well networked. You meet people, you learn from people, you watch how people do things, and you learn from that. And I think one of the key takeaways I think from this session I would suggest is that for people that are coming through in any organisation or in any business really, is that is meet people, take opportunities, learn, make mistakes, it's fine. I made some humdingers. People say to me sometimes but it's if you make a mistake, my God, what do you do? It's fine, right? If you don't make mistakes, you don't learn. So I said, never be scared of making mistakes. Take a chance, take a risk, but learn. If you make a mistake, then that's okay, as long as you don't keep making the same one, right?
Yeah, exactly.
So I kind of came through the training thing, and then got into operations management from there, and that really became the kind of foundation of what I was then going to do.
Yes.
I loved everything about that. It was a really broad area of kind of risk management and customer services and IT and you name it, everything kind of landed in this bucket called operations. So I started really specialising, I guess, in that kind of field. And what was really interesting, again, where things are so different between then and now, is that I eventually decided that, you know what, at 37, if I was ever going to have a baby, it's got to be kind of now.
Yes.
And I'd just literally been promoted at that point, and my boss sort of said, well, you got 6 weeks, right? If you want if you want this baby and you want this promotion, you've got 6 weeks. And it was kind of one of those, right? Okay, what do I do with this? You know, is that even
possible?
Humanly possible, right? And but I thought, you know what? No, I'm going to do this. And
you took
I took the challenge. I mean, Kira was breech, so I was kind of
oh my word.
Yeah, so I was in hospital for like a week. It was a cesarean. So you know, it kind of was, and I'm kind of watching the clock. 6 weeks. Oh my God, am I going to do this? But I did do it. I got back in the 6 weeks. I could barely walk. My brain was somewhere else, but you know, I was there. And then they sent me off to Warwick University to do the MBA in operations management.
Wow.
And my brain was like mush, you know. And it was kind of, you know, it was as if they were putting kind of these blockers in the way. You know, if you want to do this, you know, you can't have it all, right? So which one of these you get? And it was really challenging. Yeah. Really challenging. Very lucky for me that, you know, I had great support at home. At that point, my parents actually were living with us, and so my mum particularly was like absolutely, you know, a superstar. But Martin, my husband, as well, you know, he kind of stepped in. In fact, I think he got more time off than I had actually in the end, which is kind of crazy, right? Yeah. But having that support was so important. I mean, I think without that, I would have really struggled. Yeah. But I did get the promotion, and I did kind of prove that it was possible. And thank goodness that sort of thing doesn't really happen today. Yeah. And I think, you know, that's a really important area that I think now, you know, thankfully, you know, women have much more support, much more opportunity, you know, and a chance to be a mum and, you know, and a successful businesswoman, right? Yeah, so, absolutely. But I did get back. It was tough. I was working abroad a lot, which again was tough with a young baby at home.
How did you juggle all of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think again, it was great to have the support at home. You know, that made a real difference. But it was hard. I mean, you know, there's no getting away from the fact that, you know, I was in different time zones and doing different things. And on occasion, it felt like people were just kind of testing me. Can you do this? Can you do this? You know, is this possible? And it was a tough time, I have to say. But, you know, I guess at the end of the day, you know, we can't have it all. You have to trade something. You have to try and balance out what you can. And again, you know, I think, you know, if you're in a fortunate position where you do have that support, you know, at home and also in the office. I mean, you know, my team were always really helpful, you know, and, you know, made it as not easy, but, you know, as possible as it could possibly be, I guess, you know, to do that. So, but it was tough. But again, you know, so I kind of, you know, took those opportunities as they arose. The three women, you know, in my kind of career life were still there, were still supporting, were still kind of pushing me on, which was incredible. And I think having people that mentor, coach, you know, and develop you, that you can learn from, that have done it, have been there, have seen it, and have achieved and overcome some of these things. So important, which is why I really enjoy this kind of thing, because, you know, I think now, having had the journey that I've had, I really like the fact that I can still possibly add value back. Absolutely. You know, because of those experiences, and share some of that with people that are starting on their journey or are on their journey and are sort of facing some of these challenges now. Yes, yeah. You know, so it's great that, you know, you still kind of feel relevant. Yes, which is, you know, and I do a lot of coaching and mentoring and non-exec directorships and stuff, which is kind of a similar thing where you're sharing back, you know, what I've been lucky enough to learn and experience over the years. But so I kind of and I always had it in mind. So operations was my thing. Yeah. And so I kind of decluttered. And I'd say to people, at some point you'll realise where your kind of key skills are, where your career journey is going to take you. You know, where am I going to be better? Where's you know, where can I possibly achieve the best that I can be? And so, you know, and then go for what you're going to go for. And I went for operations, and my goal was always to be a COO. Yes. Because that kind of felt that it was going to be encompassing everything that I'd kind of done along the way, you know, and would land me in that. But again, to be an exec in a bank at that, you know, at that point was very, very rare for a woman. Yeah, absolutely. But again, I was very lucky because a lady called Susan Allen, who's now the CEO of Yorkshire Building Society, was my boss, and she had literally blasted through. And she was genuinely, and is still genuinely, an incredible leader and mentor, and is somebody that doesn't just say it because you've got to kind of say it.
Yeah,
she actually means it. Culturally, she runs an incredible team, a very diverse team, and she really makes the best of what she has around her, and people love to follow her, which I think
that's nice.
is the real difference for me in a leader and a manager.
Yes.
The leader being somebody you really want to follow, where the manager is someone who's in charge, right?
Yeah.
And Susan is a leader every day of the week, which is, I think, it's unusual when you find somebody like that, that you really genuinely feel, my goodness, that person's really got it. And so she saw something, in me. We worked together for a number of years in NatWest.
Yep.
And then when RBS came in and for that acquisition, we worked together for a while in RBS. And then we kind of got to the point where I was her COO and really enjoyed that time, and then was offered, about the same time as my husband actually, we were both offered voluntary redundancy. And it was like, oh, this is tempting. And we'd been wanting to buy somewhere for a while, and hence Italy. So we bought very fortunate to buy a little rundown place in Italy, and kind of we spent years renovating that. And it was then I kind of thought, well, what now then?
Yes.
What do I do now then?
Yeah.
Right. So I've kind of ticked that box.
Big corporates for a long time then.
Yeah, been on that corporate journey.
Yeah.
Really been very fortunate. But worked really, really hard, crazy hours. As you do. 24/7. Different kind of continents and stuff, and it was a crazy time, but also a really enjoyable time. And I worked with some amazing people. And again, I think a point to take away is about building teams, of people around you that you trust, that you develop that relationship with, and who are not the same as you. No. Right? So often you see people trying to create teams in their own image.
Yeah, you
it's
can't
crazy.
Do that, can you?
And a number of people in my team like me would be a nightmare. So, oh my gosh. But building people around you that have things that you don't, that you can really leverage.
Absolutely.
I've always been terrible at kind of credit because it bored me. And IT because I just don't get it. And stuff. So building those teams of people that have got those things that you can just really put the jigsaw together and make a picture that works. And so I absolutely say to people, think about the teams that you're building, things about the people you're working with, because those are the things that really matter. People are the things that really matter, right? Yeah. Not things. It's all about people, really. So got to that point, and then thought, look, I don't want to be in a full-time corporate world now. Done that for a long, long time, and will there now be an opportunity to use what I've got, to take what I've learned and kind of share that back a bit? So I did a bit of consulting and still do, which I really enjoy. And actually, I then worked for Susan again. She was in Santander at this point, and I did some work with her in the financial crime area, which was great. And then did a few kind of consulting roles in other banks and in other companies, which was fascinating and really a great learning journey, because having been in NatWest and RBS pretty much all my life, coming out and taking some of those things into other places was quite interesting. But but again, I think the basis of what I got was still valuable and still useful. So did that for a bit, and then got into kind of executive coaching, mentoring, and non-exec directorships, which I still do now, and really enjoy them. So, and now this kind of thing, which is, it's kind of crazy when I think about it. I sometimes kind of step back and think, why on earth would anybody want to talk to me about this stuff? What have I got? But I think you forget that, I've been around, in this kind of world for a long time, and I think, as I say, I think it's really interesting. I think still valid, is that the things that I've learned, the things that I've done, are things that people are still doing and still learning today. I think in some respects the pendulum has swung a little bit too far. I think where I was when I was having Kira was, so you've got 6 weeks, you've got to get back. I mean, that was just balmy.
Yeah.
And, it's just completely, irresponsible and crazy. But now, I think if you want that career, then you've got to think about how much time can I take? Do I want to take? What is realistic for me? What do I need? But also, what do I need to think about from a corporate perspective? And, what do I want out of my career, and how am I going to get that balance? But you have more flexibility now, I think, to
you can share it with your partner, can't
absolutely,
you? That year,
brilliant.
Cut up however you want to.
Exactly. So
do.
I think that's brilliant. But I do think you need to think about for yourself and your own circumstances, how to make that work for you.
Yes.
But now you have the opportunity and the chance and the decisions that you can take about that, which is amazing. But I think as a woman, in summary, I'd say. I think there is a big focus now on diversity, which I think is absolutely spot on and quite right. I think diversity around board tables is so important to get the right outcomes, to get the right decisions, to get the right dialogue, right?
Absolutely.
We are different, and all people are different, but to have that mix, to have a really good mix around a board table, I think is so important. But network, meet people, learn from people, make mistakes. It's fine. Be brave. And make decisions. Even if they're wrong, it doesn't matter. As long as you've got a good logic to why you made it, that's fine. But I think network. Because and I think one of the things worried me a little bit about when we, obviously had the lockdown was that, obviously people having to work remotely, there's still a lot of remote working.
Yes.
And that doesn't help when you're trying to, to network. And I think if you get the chance to get back into, meeting people face to face, having these coffee conversations, get to know people, and I think, and also, offer to help people yourselves, if you're on your journey, offer it back, be a mentor, be a coach, be somebody that can help other people. I think is, because at the end of the day, people work with people. People choose to work with people, and it doesn't really matter what you do. If you're working in a good team, in a diverse team, you get the best outcomes for everybody. That's got to be the best result, right? So yeah. So I think that's my story.
That's amazing. Thank you very much for your time.
Not at all.
Great advice, and I think some really good points around paying it forward and meeting people and networking. I think they're really key.
Definitely.
So thank you very much.
You're very welcome. My pleasure. Thank you.